Hello chaps, welcome to John Robson Guitar Tuition once again. I do hope you're well. Today I'm going to share with you a few things that I learned from this guitar solo. Yes indeed, this is a little bit of a look at the kind of things that I learned from the outro solo from Sultans of Swing, as played by the rather wonderful Mark Knopfler. As is always the case with these videos, this isn't really a here's how to play the actual notes of the solo type of deal. Although if that's what you're interested in, then you'll find a Guitar Pro and a PDF format tab in the description box below, so knock yourself out. What we're looking at here really is the sort of things that I picked up from this solo and was able to take with me and use elsewhere in other songs. Useful little techniques, as it were. And we'll begin, perversely, at the end of the solo with Mark Knopfler, I think, showing his country roots. Okay, no analysis of any part of Sultans of Swing would be complete without taking a little bit of a look at that famous double stop riff. You know, this thing? That, okay? And it occurs in this solo right on the fade out as we're kind of disappearing down the plug hole, basically. Right, so what's going on there is he's using, for the most part, thirds. Now thirds are simply scale notes that are next door but one to each other, and they're called thirds because if, for instance, I start on a D note, where's a D note? There's a D note, and count up three notes, it takes me to an F. D, D, F. This song is in the key of D minor, as you're probably aware, and it uses the scale of D natural minor for many parts of it. Certainly for this part of it, it does. D natural minor. Three notes, D, E, F. So I'm counting 1, 2, 3, D, E, F. What I do is I pair up the D note and the F note together, and that is a third. And obviously I need them both on different strings because you can't play two notes on the same string at the same time. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to shift the F note from here to here. So that's from the 10th fret on the 3rd string to the 6th fret on the 2nd string, and I do that, and that is a third. And then simply by kind of going up the scale on, let's say, this string, let's play that over a D bass note. Very minor and medieval sounding almost, that, I guess. Anyway, simply by kind of finding the notes on that string and then finding the notes a third above each of those on this string, we get something that looks like this and sounds like this. And here it is in close-up, and you can see the tab and the kind of neck diagram as well, demonstrating it. So you can see that those are the intervals used in that lick, or some of those intervals are the ones that are used in that lick. He basically goes like this. Look at the tab if you want to see that in a little bit more close up, but that's basically the bones of what's going on. And what I learned from this was basically how to arrange notes in thirds like that. I think possibly the next lick that I used, that sort of when I was just messing around with this kind of thing, was maybe this one. Where is it? Here it is. Old Van Morrison thing. And just many other licks that had been hitherto a mystery to me suddenly started making sense. Now I knew this little kind of dodge of pairing notes up in this manner. And it went even further, because what I also discovered you could do was kind of turn these thirds upside down, and that makes something called sixths. I didn't know that at the time. So what I mean by turning them upside down is, let's say we've got this one here, this D, and this F. Okay, what happens if I play the F on the bottom and the D on the top, as opposed to D on the bottom and F on the top as it is there? Well, there's the F on the bottom, and I can quite easily reach the D on the top there. I can arrange the same sort of thing. I can basically go. And I think probably one of the first licks that I tumbled across using that principle of using sixths or upside down thirds, as I was thinking of them, was this one. Obviously Wanted Dead or Alive by Bon Jovi. It uses a slightly different scale. It uses the D Dorian mode, but you know, it's exactly the same principle. So just that one little Sultans of Swing lick unlocked whole solos in some cases, or riffs or songs that just didn't make any kind of sense, and I would have struggled with previous to that, but now it all made perfect sense, and it really kind of spurred me on. Okay, let's move on by seeing what little tricks the fantastic Mr. Knopfler uses to make the solo kind of fit the chord sequence. Okay, as this is largely about making the licks that you're playing fit the chords that are happening underneath them, it wouldn't be a bad idea to start off by looking at what the chords are, would it? So basically we're in D minor here, and we spend a bar on a D minor chord, a bar on a B flat chord, and then 2 bars on a C chord in this kind of fashion. So the first couple of examples I'm going to show you is where he's kind of playing to a D minor tonality using a D minor pentatonic. He doesn't really in these examples do much of anything that's relevant to the B flat chord, but because we spend 2 whole bars, 50% of the 4-bar loop that he's playing over, sitting on that C chord, he does quite often tailor the licks to fit a C major tonality. Let's take a look at this first example. Okay, so what's going on there then? Well, it begins, as you would expect with any guitar solo in D minor, with a little D minor pentatonic lick, which goes like this. And by the time we get to that point, we've already kind of been through and past the B flat chord, and we're now on the C chord. So he simply does a descending hammer-on pull-off lick using these notes, starting on an E note, hammer-on pull-off to G, then D to E, hammer on, pull off, then C to D, hammer on, pull off, then G to A, hammer on, pull off, then D to E, hammer on, pull off, and finishing on the C note there. Like that. And if you add all those notes together, the C, D, E, G and A, you get a C major pentatonic, which is, you know, matching the C major chord that's happening at that point in the accompaniment. There's another example of where he does this pretty much straight after that. Here it is in close-up. So what's going on here then? Well, we begin with a D minor pentatonic lick. Here it is. Notice that he uses a couple of like percussive kind of hits on the string there, just to give it a little bit more venom. It just seems a little bit kind of like the notes are being spat out at you. That's my interpretation of it anyway. A kind of a stuttery sort of feel, maybe you might think of it as. But anyway, that's what he does. And that is, as I say, D minor pentatonic, quite clearly coming from position number 5 of D minor pentatonic scale. If you don't know your pentatonic positions, then there's a lesson elsewhere on this channel which will kind of guide you through all of that. By the time he's finished that D minor lick, we're kind of past the D minor chord and out the other side of the B flat, and we're now on the C chord. So he goes to a C major pentatonic, and he overlaps that D minor position with this C major position, and that second half of the lick, here it is slowly sliding up to that E note there, hammer on, pull off, G to A, and then just a few kind of descending tumbles down this C, A, G, E kind of thing. To me, on the track, it sounds very much like he's doing that all with hammer-ons and pull-offs, just kind of picking that note there every time he goes back to the top E string. But what you can get from this is that you can stay on the same part of the neck and move from one pentatonic scale to another, as is dictated by the chords that are going on underneath. Okay, let's move on to the next example where he actually plays very, very specifically to the chords indeed. Okay, so what's going on here then are some arpeggios. Arpeggios are just chords spelled out one note at a time. And we start off with a D minor arpeggio. A D minor chord has the notes of D, F and A in it. There's a D minor chord. And there's your D note. It occurs twice in this particular voicing. There's your F note. And there's your A note. So D, F, A. Here we go. D, F, and then there's the A there, and he plays it in this order. It goes F, pull off to D, over onto the second string for the A note, and then back to the D note to kind of complete the cycle. Now the clever thing is that when the chord changes from the D minor, it goes to a B flat. Okay, and all you have to do, and all he does, to change that D minor arpeggio into a B flat major arpeggio is swap out this A note, 10th fret on the B string, for a B flat note, 11th fret on the B string. So now you get this shape. So D minor, B flat, and then If you take a B flat chord, up 2 frets, it becomes a C major chord. So take that B flat major arpeggio, move it up 2 frets, you've got a C major arpeggio, which is where he kind of sits for the 2 bars of the C major chord. You'll see a similar kind of concept on the back end of the Hotel California solo by the Eagles, where the lead guitar simply spells out the arpeggios of the underlying chords. Like that. Obviously the Eagles did a twin guitar harmony part on that, but the principle is the same. Another place where I saw a very, very similar kind of thing, especially when it comes to the just changing one note to make the arpeggio different, was a few years ago. A band I was in, we were doing that Michael Schenker tune, Into the Arena, and you know that arpeggio section in the middle is kind of played by the keyboards on the track, I think, but we didn't have a keyboard player, so it was down to me to come up with some arpeggios that fitted it. And I think, if I remember correctly, it starts off with a G minor arpeggio, which I played with the open G string, the B flat note at the 3rd fret, and the D note at the 7th fret, and I gave it a bit of this. And then simply by moving that D note up a semitone to E flat, I get an E flat arpeggio. So it's like that. Now, the point I'm making here is that the first time I encountered that idea of just changing one note in a shape and it makes it fit a completely different chord was on this Mark Knopfler twiddly bit, as he calls it, from Sultans of Swing. Okay, so that is how at various points in the solo he makes the licks that he's playing kind of fit like a tailor-made suit the underlying chords that are going on at any given point. Let's move on now to looking at the overall structure and dynamics of the solo. Probably, I think, the most important part of what makes this solo work. Okay then, structure and dynamics, how the solo tells a story. Now then, if you haven't thought about music in this kind of storytelling way in the past, then this might seem a bit odd, but it is really worth a look. Many great guitar solos, in fact many great pieces of music that are memorable and stay with you, use this storytelling principle. So how do we adapt telling a story into a musical context? Well, you have recognisable characters. One such character, or lick as we would call it in normal guitar parlance, would be this. Another one would be, okay, so there's a couple of licks there that occur more than once in the solo. And when you meet them again, it's like it gives you a sense of reassurance. It's like meeting an old friend who's re-emerged. Other storytelling or plot devices include building tension, a sense of peril, a sense of drama, a cliffhanger, if you will, and there are musical devices that are well established for creating that same sense of tension. We're going to be looking at those later. Now, this link between storytelling and characters, if you like, and the music is a principle called leitmotif, and it's all over movie scores. I mean, probably an obvious one would be, whenever you see Indiana Jones, you always tend to hear this piece of music. You know, it's not just the theme for Raiders of the Lost Ark or any of the other Indiana Jones films. Whenever Harrison Ford in that hat kind of comes into shot, you will always hear that piece of music somewhere in the score. So there is that kind of link there between storytelling and music. Right, so we begin the solo with, as I said, our kind of main character, which is followed by that. And those two licks there, we've looked at how they're kind of comprised in terms of the scales that are being used, but in a broader sort of sense, you've got a question followed by an answer. So you get that sort of call and response, question and answer thing, which again, like telling a story, is based around kind of linguistic principles. After that, what we've got is the beginning of a little bit of tension building. How do you build tension in music? Sense of excitement? Well, speed is one way of doing it, and we have this lick that starts off with and then goes into that kind of thing. Okay, we're starting to introduce a little bit of speed, a little bit of tension, excitement, call it what you will. After that, we go into the next kind of 4-bar section of the solo, where that speedy kind of thing continues with this lick. That. Again, I mean, it's not shredding in kind of the modern sense of the word, but it is sort of faster and more energetic sounding than the rest of the laid back kind of bluesy stuff that's happened largely up to this point. It's continuing that feeling of speed and excitement. You feel like you're getting some momentum happening. And after that, what we get is a different method of developing tension and heightened excitement. Harmonic tension. Basically making note choices over the chords that sound a little bit tense. What we have is this lick. Now, the significance of that lick, first of all, is it's the first lick in the solo where we're using something more modally based, the D Aeolian mode, as opposed to a pentatonic. We can tell straight away that it's not based around a pentatonic scale because of the first two notes in the lick, the A note and the B flat. They're a semitone apart, and there are no semitone intervals in a pentatonic scale. But if we just look at the notes that we've got in this, we've got an A, a B flat, bend the B flat up to C, then the E note, B flat bent up to C again, D and A. If you take all of those notes and kind of superimpose them over the top of the C major chord that's happening at that particular moment, then you get this kind of harmony, which is a very tense chord. It's almost it is a jazz chord. It's a C dominant 13. You don't perceive it as sounding jazzy when you're listening to the track. All you kind of perceive is that, okay, yeah, this is sounding like it needs to lead on to something else. It's creating that sense of momentum, that cliffhanger kind of effect where you want to see how things turn out. And how do things turn out? Well, we go to that series of arpeggios. That kind of thing. Okay, so now the harmonic tension has been resolved because we're sticking entirely to notes from the underlying chords. There's nothing dissonant there, but we're keeping that speed-based sense of tension. It reinforces the ongoing momentum of the solo. It keeps you interested, basically. And what does he do after those arpeggios? He does them again in order to just ram that point home that, you know, we're kind of motoring on towards a big finish here. It's a very, very clever plot device. Yeah, I tell you a good example of this in a movie is, you know, Where Eagles Dare.
Broadsword calling Danny boy.
Brilliant film, I think. I watch it every Christmas. Remember that fight scene that just seems to go on forever on top of the cable car? That's exactly the same kind of idea as this. You're keeping the momentum, the tension going almost to an unbearable point. And where do we go after that? Right, well, we're on the kind of home straight now, so what does Mark Knopfler do? Well, remember how we started off with this lick? And so on. How does it go after that? Yeah. I said we'd meet that character again, and indeed we do. All he does is he takes all of those notes up an octave. Like that, exactly the same lick played an octave higher. And I didn't notice until I started working this solo out that that was the same lick. It just somehow kind of felt satisfying and familiar when you land there, but I didn't really kind of understand that what he was doing was just playing the same lick again. And since I figured that out, it's something that I tend to do in a lot of my solos. Remember what you played for your first lick, and then when you want to wind things up and bring it to a close, go back to that first lick again, maybe in a different octave like is being done here, or maybe just in the same octave. It's a great way of making things sound like they've come full circle. And again, just to kind of reinforce this idea that now we're kind of drawing things to a close, he goes back to that double stop riff. As a way of saying, okay guys, we're done now, let's take it home. So you can see throughout that solo that there is a definite sense of building tension, working up to a climax, and then coming down the other side in exactly the same way as a story kind of leads you on a similar journey. You know, it's a very, very well established principle, and it's something that you can do in your own solos. It's certainly something I do in my solos, just, you know, to give them a sense of a narrative. That's a good way of putting it. Right then, that's it for today, folks. I do hope you've enjoyed this little look at Mark Knopfler's wonderful solo from Sultans of Swing. If you would like some tailored one-to-one guitar tuition and you live on Teesside in the northeast of England, or indeed if you don't live on Teesside in the northeast of England and you want some tuition via Skype, then get in touch with me via the details at the end of this video. Your first lesson is free, by the way. I'll also just take a moment now to plug both of my albums, which are out at the moment and beginning to sell not too badly, it has to be said, so thanks to everybody who's downloaded or listened on Spotify or whatever. You're making an old man very happy. The first one is called The Whiskey Made Me Do It. That came out almost a year ago now, and the other one is Handles for Forks, and they're both chock full of bluesy, melodic, shreddy guitar playing, so, you know, what's not to like there. Right, okay folks, that's it for now. I'll see you all again next time. Bye for now.